Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I can see more people are still logging on, but we'll get started in the meantime. My name is Gemma Clements, and I am the Corporate Engagement and Capacity Building Manager at CDSB, and I'll be moderating the session today. We have a great panel of experts ready to talk to you about the evolving reporting landscape and how to keep up with good practice. Now, this is the second part of a two-part online event, and yesterday we held the first event that looked at the changing policy landscape within the EU. Today, we want to shift the focus a little bit and focus on what that means for corporates and for corporate reporting, including some discussion around the current state of play and what constitutes good practice. We also want to take this opportunity to launch our updated EU Environmental Disclosure Handbook, which will be available online very soon. And this is a document that has a selection of annotated examples from around the EU. It's the third iteration of this report, and I hope that it continues to be very helpful for those of you who are still trying to understand what good practice looks like. Speaking of the chat function, we very much encourage you to send your questions throughout the session on whichever system you're using to watch this webinar. I will try and weave in the questions throughout the session, but we also have some time at the end for a Q&A. Now, for those of you who don't know very much about CDSB, I'll do a very brief introduction before we move on to the speakers. The Climate Disclosure Standards Board was set up in 2007 in Davos at the World Economic Forum, and our mission was to align climate and environmental reporting with financial reporting. We existed because there was a gap in accounting standards that fully addressed the systemic and complex financial impacts of climate change within companies. And so CDSB created the CDSB framework to help companies mainstream their environmental and climate disclosure using the same rigor as financial reporting. Now, I've worked at CDSB for nearly 6 years and been involved in sustainability for a lot longer. And never before have I seen such momentum and mainstream discussions around climate change and sustainability reporting. So I feel like the discussions today are very timely, and I'm very pleased to be joined by 3 very knowledgeable speakers who I will introduce as they speak. So I won't do a full introduction of the full panel at first. I'll introduce them just as they speak. Firstly, I would like to welcome Andy Beanland, who is a director at the Redefining Value team at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, WBCSD. He has been working on a number of projects around sustainability reporting, and we are very grateful and thankful that he has joined us today. Andy, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. And is it 6 years already since you've been working at CDSB? Yeah, so Gemma and I have actually worked together for quite a long time because standardization of ESG reporting has really been part of our ambition at WBCSD. This was really driven by requests from members to kind of try and make sense of what, at the time, back in 2015, they were calling the alphabet soup of sustainability reporting standards. And we actually worked very closely with our colleagues at CDSB to develop a website called the Reporting Exchange. And we did this for 2 reasons. This was essentially to map out all the voluntary and mandatory ESG reporting requirements across 70 plus countries, and also look at what were the indicators that those reporting frameworks were using and disclosing, asking companies to disclose. And the rationale for that was to support members trying to understand what this space was like, but also to provide the evidence base for standardization and harmonization of ESG reporting frameworks. Now, it seems like it's been a long time coming, but I think we've got to the stage now where standardization and mandatory ESG reporting is kind of really inevitable. And that's been evolving so quickly in the last 12, 18 months that I think it's probably surprised, more than a few of us. And I just wanted to go through a couple of areas where we're seeing the developments evolving, and maybe giving a quick update to the audience. I think the first area is around the kind of international efforts of the IFRS. And we're really encouraged by the work that they're doing to establish the International Sustainability Standards Board. I think at COP next week there'll be some significant announcements around companies signaling support for this process, and we fully expect that the International Sustainability Standards Board will be formally announced there. Their key areas of work, as far as we understand it, is really focused on enterprise value and investor needs, creating that global baseline, that global standard, and there we'll be taking a climate-first approach and developing this sort of enhanced prototype climate standard, and it's largely going to be based on the TCFD recommendations. And I'm delighted that, I don't know if everyone can see on the screen yet, but Wim Bartels is here, and I'm sure Wim, as very much an expert in TCFD, will dig into that a bit later. But I also understand that this work is the ISSB on building these sort of standards is going to really, rather than being starting from scratch, it's really going to build on the work that's being done by SASB, by ISC, by CDSB, including working very closely with the individuals who have been involved in all those developments over the years, and that we're looking at by sometime in Q1 next year there'll be a draft disclosure, and then by something about the middle of the year the final standards will be launched. That's incredibly quick in terms of standard setting, and for companies, and what we're talking to our members about is this. This really means that there's across 130 odd countries there will be more or less a common base for disclosure. And that's really important when we think about particularly those strategic forward-looking disclosures that are so important for investors. I guess the big question that remains for us is how do these standards, how are they going to dovetail with what's happening, particularly in the EU? And I think our messaging is WBCSD to all parties involved in standard setting, whether it's at the ISSB or the European Union, is that those two developments that are happening side by side really need to be complementary rather than competing. So in terms of what's going on in the EU, probably most of the audience is aware that the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group have been tasked by the EU to develop reporting standards that will support the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which member states are really required to adopt by the end of 2022. And they're expected to release their draft core standards sometime next year. And then those reporting obligations will apply from the 2023 reporting period. So again, this is moving incredibly quickly. The current state of play in the development standards is that EFRAG have published a climate standard prototype paper, which is outlining 3 main goals for the climate standard, covering both climate mitigation and adaptation. I'm really pleased to see that one of their goals is this driving for compatibility with international initiatives, and they've got that written down there in that as their ambitions for the standard, which is great. Also looking for transparency for investors and other stakeholders, and obviously trying to align with the ambitions of the EU's climate objectives too. And then from what we can see from this prototype paper is that there's a strong alignment with the TCFD recommendations. On areas of strategy, it's talking about the business strategy and climate and the potential effects of climate-related risk. It's talking about the risks and opportunities, and it's also talking about climate governance, so how governance structures set up and how committed at board level responsive for climate-related issues. They're also looking at implementation, targets and policies, and various performance measures, which I won't go into now. But I think this is a really positive step forward. There will be probably some significant changes, and there's obviously public consultations and all that sort of stuff to go through. But like I said, we're expecting to see some draft of these core standards by mid-22, and the fact that it looks like it's aligning with what's coming out elsewhere is really good news, I think, for companies. It means that hopefully they won't have to resort in multiple disclosures or multiple processes to meet different disclosure requirements. And then I just wanted to touch on one thing that we've seen happening in the US, although this is focused on the EU, I think there is relevance because there's talk that the US developments may impact on European headquartered companies too. So back in March this year, the SEC announced plans to meet investor demand for climate and ESG information. So they're in the process of developing a climate rule. We don't really know what that looks like at the moment, but sometime in early 22, we're kind of expecting to see some draft rule, and then with the final rule to be coming into force sometime in June, August timeframe. There's a possibility that disclosure will be going to the 10K from 10K in the US, or at least it will need to reconcile with that 10K disclosure. And the word on the street is that this is going to also strongly align with the TCFD, with a particular focus on the kind of transition risk. So our understanding is the SEC is looking to understand if business models are set up for a low carbon economy, and that they are being included in any assumptions being made around future value. And what's really interesting is that the SEC has actually started to enforce the 2010 climate change disclosure guidance. So what we're kind of hearing is the SEC is going to want to see that through line between that 2010 guidance, the narrative disclosure, and how that's flowing through into the financial statements. So this really needs to be on companies' radars, and this is what we're telling our members. And the piece that might be interesting for the sort of European headquartered companies is that with a field listing in the US, that in the future there may be indications that any rule might have implications for those companies who are making disclosures through the Form 20F2. And there's also likely that there'll be assurance requirements on those disclosures as well. So companies need to start getting their internal processes, their systems sorted out and ready for what's coming. So I guess to sum up, there's been a lot of gone in the last 12 months, like you said. We think 2022 and beyond is going to be equally challenging and lots of developments. So we're really telling our members to get prepared.
Thanks, Andy. And yeah, I remember our meetings 6 years ago where we were thinking about how do we even categorize all the different things that are going on as we were building out the reporting exchange. And there feels, I definitely think that there feels like it's coming together, and that we're kind of getting to that end goal that we're all desperately wanting. I just want to encourage everybody, send your questions in as they come in, so that we can ask questions as we go as well. But I think what Andy's given us is a really good overview of all of the different things that are happening and some of the key areas that certainly everyone should keep their eye on. But let's now move to our second speaker, who is Wim Bartels. Wim is currently partner at KPMG Netherlands, where he has a wealth of knowledge and experience in sustainability reporting and assurance. He is not only a current member of the TCFD, but has been so since the very beginning. Wim, thank you so much for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gemma, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining this. Building on Andy's introduction, I think it would be good to maybe say a little on what we have seen at the TCFD in terms of progress. Then a little on some practical lessons, if you like, that I also see in working with companies, and then finally maybe a few comments on assurance that Andy, you also commented on, and particularly preparation for that, of course, in light of the upcoming assurance requirements under the EU regulation. But let me start maybe with the TCFD this year. And just a few weeks ago, we released the third status report after the release of the recommendations in 2017 to track progress. And you may have seen somewhere some communication about TCFD, and we're always very positive and excited about the support we get from investors, but also from companies. Now over 2,500 companies supporting the TCFD. and many investors who and financial institutions who support the TCFD. So all positive and excited, but we need to look at actual progress. And if we look into our status report that we just released, then also there are some positive comments to make. Over 50% of the companies that we research every year have now reported at least on one of the recommendations of the TCFD. But here is where the positive comments start to end, because we don't see yet more than half of the companies reporting on a majority of the recommendations. We don't see any company, I haven't seen any company that completely fulfills all the recommendations of the TCFD. And there is a lot to do in light of, in terms of harmonization, standardization that Andy also referred to earlier. And then maybe most critically, the TCFD, as you may know, was established to come with a framework for disclosure on the financial impacts of climate change. That is what it's all for. What is the financial risk and or opportunity to a company, and what does it mean for strategy when we look at climate change? And there we still see significant room for improvement. A number of companies do report now on scenario analysis. Many do in a qualitative way. And most do not yet provide a full comprehensive overview of the risk and opportunities they face and what it means for the resilience of their companies. And so that disclosure on resilience, it's under the strategy pillar. Those are still the lowest being reported, and that requires really big attention. The good news for all of us here in the webinar today is that Europe is still the leading region. That is not or that is for obvious reasons, maybe a better word to say. Europe has always been leading in sustainability reporting. The EU is driving a lot of the efforts, and therefore here you also see that the European companies take this first on board. So that is a very good start, I think. Having said that, and then maybe reflecting a little on what we see in practice, and I start focusing on climate, but maybe I should extend it a little later to wider ESG or sustainability. The first thing is when we started with the implementation of the TCFD recommendations, I had many conversations with companies who said, "Oh yeah, working on that. We have our carbon emissions, and so we know where the risk is." And then we had to have a conversation that was, well, you know, risk is a little more than just carbon emissions. It's physical, but what about consumer behavior? What about changing technology? And then slowly but definitely, of course, the conversation started to change. Still today, I notice in working with clients that the real deep understanding of climate-related risk and opportunities is, in honesty, fairly limited. And that is not to be negative about this. This is just because this is quite a complex topic, and to look at sustainability in a wide sense and climate specifically with a long-term lens and translating that to what it means for the resilience of your company is a hard thing to do. And therefore that needs attention. And that attention needs to come from multiple disciplines within companies. That's the second thing we see in practice, is that in a number of cases, it's been a kind of delegated to the sustainability team because it's a sustainability issue, but it's not. It's a financial issue, and therefore you need financial management, you need risk management, you need strategy, and you need the business to really work on climate change and to really grasp it. Grasping that is also a third thing that we see, and sorry to name the things that I think that needs to improve, but that hopefully helps all of us to move this forward. And the third in that regard is that if companies work on with the TCFD framework as a basis on climate risk, they start to look at the numbers. Give me the numbers, give me the carbon emissions, give me a portfolio at risk, but I need a number. And in my view, yes, in the end, you need numbers, but you first need to have a very thorough understanding of what it really means. So a deep understanding with the multiple disciplines, as I just said, and that I think is generally room for improvement. Now, as I already alluded to, scenario analysis has been increasingly used. That comes with a lot of challenges, and these need, I think, also to be recognized and appreciated. There are issues with data availability. The data granularity is low. Data quality is also low. And it's difficult to assess full scenarios for the company as a whole. That is just a given, a fact. It's nothing, again, good or bad, but it's, I think, to take in mind when you start working on particularly scenario analysis. And in my perspective, that is the most important recommendation of the TCFD, because it really links disclosure to the real business and the real strategy. And then a final comment is that, and that comes back to the TCFD status report, disclosure really needs to be strengthened. The companies that we work with are always a bit cautious. Well, let's start with governance and then a little on risk management, but let not go out with the scenario analysis or the assumptions, because, you know, it may be misinterpreted. And it might put us at a competitive disadvantage. These are all, by the way, good arguments, good reasons, but at the same time, we need to progress here. So the recommendation there is, yes, start a bit cautiously, but design a roadmap to open up and look at your peers, because in a few years' time, this will be out in the open for hopefully most companies. And that is also because of the CSRD requirements, of course, that will require all the European large companies to not only report on the inside out perspective, but also the outside in. And climate change is then just the first, but we also have, I think, similar approaches to be taken for biodiversity, for inequality, for diversity as such, and I can go on. I think it's really a change of mindset that we all could benefit from here. And in that regard, I applaud the EU initiative, because it helps us focusing, putting our radar in the right direction. That then also comes with disclosure requirements and with assurance. And Gemma, I'm gonna end with that also in light of the time. With assurance, of course, quite a number of companies, particularly again in Europe, have been used to assurance for their sustainability reporting. The upcoming requirements come, of course, with further requirements and further extension of the assurance scope due to that double materiality concept. And we should also not forget that the ones that are currently reporting are, for a majority, the listed companies, and large non-listed need to get into the game here. So the lesson that I have taken here so far is that the earlier you start, the better. That may sound a bit like consultant speak, and it is, but you also need to recognize that it's only a year from now that you need to be ready with your systems. You need to have the right KPIs, have set targets, designed your strategy if you haven't, etc. If you don't, then at least you need to report on that, and you better, I think, don't get into that situation. I also see that as a big opportunity to improve the business, to focus on sustainability, focus on the right KPIs, and have them at the right level of quality by looking already into assurance. And that's not so much that opinion at the end of the day, but it is to work with auditors and or advisors to say, are my processes and systems in order? Can we use them to come with reliable data? Do we use it in our management and control cycle, so that you're not only ready for disclosure, but also ready for a real business improvement? And with that, Gemma, I think I end my introduction here. I'm pretty sure we're going to discuss more, at least on assurance, but we'll get to that later. I'm very much looking forward to our next speaker.
Thank you very much, Wim. And the points that you make are very much things that we get asked by companies, where to start. We're talking mostly to sustainability professionals, and they're asking us, how do we get our finance team and our risk team involved in this as well. So I think that there's a lot more that needs to be done, as you say, and hopefully, as the standards are developing, as Andy talked about at the beginning, and as we're moving towards harmonization of what is expected from companies, and there's a clearer outline of what those standards are, then companies will be able to align and improve their reporting year on year, as we've been seeing. Thank you so much. And so that moves us very nicely onto our third speaker. And we're very grateful to welcome Ignio Oleazar Aguero, who is Head of Planning and Reporting on Non-Financial Information at Iberdrola. We are very grateful that you are able to join us today and share your experience as a report preparer. So looking at the other side and seeing what the practice has been and the experiences that you've had. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I don't know if you can see my screen. I make I would say a short presentation on the different topics that both Wim and Andy already talk, and try to put on a practice basis what these magnificent speakers they have already explained, and how we have transferred the landscape in terms of non-reporting financial standards and the laws that we have here in Spain, and also the more in detail the TCFD process that we have done, or more in detail how we have evolved that TCFD implementation since 2017. So moving on to the slide, I would like to point out this TCFD quote that I think that without reliable information, I would like to step for a second over there due to the fact that there are a couple of words that they have been putting on here: homogenization, governance, the landscape of the different reporting criteria that we have right now. So in Iberdrola, providing reliable information in terms of the financial, but also in terms of the non-financial information as a whole information that can be included within this ESG world, it's something that we have been very detailed and try to be committed since the last 16 years. So there are a couple of words that you point out, Win, in terms of reliable information, governance, in terms of assurance. This is something that in Iberdrola we have been very thoroughly understanding, and I think the importance to provide information to the market. Okay, so prior to go to the non-financial reporting in Iberdrola, I would like to give a quick overview of the company, in order to know the implication of reporting the information, and more in detail the non-financial. We are a company with presence in a dozen of countries, mainly Spain, the UK, the States, Mexico, and Brazil, but in other areas such as Australia, Japan, the continental Europe. We have invested in the last 20 years more than 120 billion euros, and we are 38,000 employees all over the world. And that is the picture right now, but for the future, until 2030, we expect to invest even more, 150 billion euros. Therefore, what we would like to point out is the implication that this has on the reporting itself in terms of systems that already you mentioned, the implication for the system, the reporting system that you need, and in order to get on board all the people, and the importance of having the information duly and fully reported. As an example, in the last 2020 report process, we have 800 employees included or working together, collaborating in the non-financial reporting process. So there is a huge number of employees that they have to bear in mind the importance of this reporting and the impact that this reporting has in the market. So how we deal with the reporting itself, how we manage this. We have a stakeholders model group that over there we try to obtain which are the main thoughts, the main worries of the different stakeholders that we have a relationship with. So over there we obtain which are the main worries or the main things that they need or they will need to receive from the company. And this stakeholder group is feeding two things. One thing is the sustainable development plan, that are the main goals for the future, because another recommendation that we have from the different reporting standards is that you need to provide not only what has happened, but what will happen or what you expect to commit from a market point of view. So therefore, this is the main goal. The main objectives of these stakeholders would be to focus on, I don't know, environmental, social, governance for sure, but indeed, or as a consequence, also on the financial. So over there, you need to have some kind of objectives in order to provide visibility for the future. We are not a company that is on the past, but it's also looking on the future. And the second thing is more on the present, the materiality analysis. This is the main worries that the stakeholders have right now. So it's as an input to be used for the non-financial reporting process. Those are the main material topics that our stakeholders need or will need to receive from the company. So moving on to the area or to the world that we have right now on the standard basis, we try to compile which are the different standards that Andy already mentioned that hopefully is about to be homogenized in the short-term basis. So over there we have the Spanish law that, just to provide you an example, it was approved in November 2018 and it came in force for the reporting of 2018. So if you are not advancing, if you are not improving your reporting systems, you wouldn't be able to fulfill to 2018 criteria or 2018 law. That as an example. Moving on to the GRI standards. The GRI standards is the bulk of the main standard that we use as a company to report information. We are exhaustive and we provide all the information that these material topics are requested by or have been analyzed by this materiality analysis. But moreover, we also have the TCFD. We also include the CDSB standard. We also have these sustainable development goals. We have this social impact throughout the LBG model spend, and also we have the United Nations Global Compact. So we have a bulk of different standards, and also new ones are coming. As Andy was mentioning before, this Article 8 on the taxonomy is about to come and it's going to need to be reported in 2021. But also we have another corporate sustainability reporting directive that is in the horizon and for sure is about to come and will come in force in 2023. Apart from that, we have another report that fulfills the international framework agreement, the integrated report that we have on two different bases. They're integrated on a PDF document, and also we have a microsite and an online basis. That is, these two documents, are the most downloaded ones because it's a matter of compiling of all the information that the non-financial reporting document has. Because you have to bear in mind that this integrated reporting has around 100 pages, but the non-financial information report, compiling all the different reporting criteria, so the different reporting standards that we have right now, is over 550 pages. So you have to take into account the amount of work that the companies are currently forced or are currently encouraged, I would say, to provide this information to the market. So, and prior to go to this TCFD and Iberdrola and try to focus the information that how we have dealt in the last couple of years, I would like to point out a thing that Andy said, that this homogenization process, I think that is inevitable, but we need time. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, a friend of mine sent me a cartoon where it puts the fastest things on Earth. And the first one was a cheetah, the second one was a plane, the third one was the light, and the fourth one is the ESG reporting criteria. So we need to bear in mind that for sure, we need to move fast. We need to go further down the road. But the financial information has taken at least 20 years to have one single IFRS standards that is used on an homogeneous basis for the whole spectrum of companies that they need to report on IFRS. So we cannot jump and say in 2 years' time, in 1 year time, we are going to be able to have the system, to have the governance, and to have every single company homogenized and reported on the same basis. So that is a clear message. For sure, we have plenty of different reporting criteria. Okay, but right now we need to homogenize. Okay, but give us some time, because the systems, and for big companies such as Iberdrola, frankly speaking, is becoming quite difficult to fulfill this criteria and this homogenization process. And the second part, I would like to speak on the TCFD in Iberdrola, and some of the message that Wim already put on the table. We have been very supportive since 2017. We have done some analysis, financial impact analysis, both on a qualitative and a quantitative basis. We are trying to include all the recommendations. For sure, some kind of improvement will be included in the 2021 process. We have done a scenario analysis. We are trying to disclose and to improve the governance and risk management analysis. And for sure, we need to assure the information that we are providing right now and we will provide in the future. I think that as long as we don't have an homogenized standards in the future, it's going to be quite difficult to provide assurance in the same level that the financial information has. We have a reasonable assurance right now, and we expect to maintain this reasonable assurance, but for the future, we need to have more clarity on the comparable, no, for a pure verifier point of view or auditor point of view. So what we have done since 2017 that we commit ourselves to fulfill the TCFD recommendation. What we have done over there is try to go on a step-by-step process, trying to include people within the internal different groups. We already published in February 2019 an integrated report, this information. We also include other additional members to this working group in March 2018, and we analyze, or we run a climate scenario analysis in 2018, and we provide this information to the CDP, and Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And in 2019 and 2020, we already include additional information on the published reports in 2019, and in 2020 we increased the governance and risk management information on the report, and also we update analysis on climate change scenarios both on a qualitative and a quantitative basis. So how we have dealt this whole process of the TCFD in 2020? What we have done is try to include the businesses, the energy and policies and climate change group, the corporate sustainability group already, the risk management department, innovation department, and investor relations. And what we have done is run a scenario selection, and scenarios KPIs, operational KPIs, and other scenarios impact, both in terms of qualitative and in terms of qualitative basis. First of all, we choose which is the scenario selection, which is the medium case, or the scenario that we currently had, that is the Paris -2 degrees on the sustainable development of EIE, the SDS, this net zero emission in 2070. We also have this EIA stated policy that it should be the low case scenario, and also we have the net zero scenario, in order to know the availability or the different alternatives that we have if we increase our ambition and we the target for 2030 2020. Once we run this, we try to know exactly what could be the impact in terms of key parameters of the different scenarios and the impact in the total production of the company, the renewal capacity, the thermal capacity, the customer, and the networks. Bearing in mind that our main businesses are renewables, we have generation and customers, and last but not least, we have the networks. Over there, you can see that is in a bold basis the impact that it can be more or less in terms of the different scenarios that we are running. The third part of the process is try to go deeply on the different countries where we have presence and try to understand if for the different businesses in each country, which could be the impact. For example, in the States, we'll have the renewable capacity. If we increase the ambition in terms of onshore wind and onshore solar, it will have a positive impact. For sure, if the regulatory and legal processes for offshore wind goes easier, we will be able to have a positive impact. Also in the network investment, for example, in the renewable capacity in Brazil, in the network investment in Brazil and in Spain, the different technology that we have right now, no? The renewable capacity, the networks, the energy storage through the hydrogen, and the commercial demand that we have right now. Okay, and other countries, as I mentioned before, that we also have in the continental Europe and in Australia. We are also developing right now different areas such as Japan, such as Denmark, that I don't know, we are going to be able to have it in 2021 due to the stage of maturity that they have. So once we have analyzed this from a pure scenario basis, we have put over there what could be the qualitative impact in terms of if we go down to the steps scenario and if we go up to the net zero scenario. For sure, the steps scenario will have an impact on the retail, mainly in Spain, and the global generation, if it goes below the expectations or the base case scenario that we have right now, will have an impact both in global generation in Mexico and in networks, mainly in the States. And in the right side of the slide, you can see over there, if we go up in the ambition process, we need to go, we will go, sorry, and a positive impact in the medium, low, and high scenarios. And we have make some kind of double assessment on a worst case scenario, a medium and high impact in terms of the different scenario that we have run. And also, this is a new process that we already said that the quantitative impact of this, we have made an analysis which could be the impact on the EBITDA for 2030. Over there, we have the retail for sure, as long as the steps scenario has an impact, but we have quantified that below 100 million euros, and the networks the same. But the bright side of the road could be the net zero scenario for sure. If we go further, as everyone currently is have on top of their minds to go further on the ambition, and this COP26 that will take place next week, we hope that it will have some kind of commitment. We will have, as a company, a positive scenario between 100 million euros up to 300,000 euros. And I would like to end up this presentation very linked to the prior slide, that there's some kind of, or there was some kind of skeptical guys over there saying that the climate change threatens our existence, but in the end, it will threaten our investment, it will threaten our P&L, it will threaten our bottom line of the company. So that is something that it should be bear in mind by the different stakeholders and by the different financial members of the company. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive walkthrough of everything that Iberdrola are doing. As I mentioned to you before this webinar, I actually follow Iberdrola's reporting over the last few years. And one of the things that really strikes me is how the disclosure is improving. And I think that's something that's quite important to understand. We appreciate that a lot of these things take time, and that there needs to be an iterative approach, and that companies need to take it as a step by step in order to fully embed the various different elements. So thank you all for your presentations, and then we're going to move now into some discussion and some Q&A. And we've had some questions coming in, but do continue to send those in. So I'm gonna start with the question around harmonization and all these different standards that companies are doing. And we just saw from Iberdrola that you know, you've taken on a lot of the standards and then that you're responding to a lot of them. And one of the questions that we get asked, and we've been asked today, is where do companies start if they are overwhelmed by all of these different standards? Where can they find out which ones are the most important to respond to? You know, where do we find that information?
Okay, in order to be clear, what is the path that we have had in the past in order to have this 550 pages standard? We have, as you mentioned before, a step-by-step process, trying to go first on a GRI basis, try to fulfill the law. At least I would say that it could be the first milestone, try to fulfill the law. Throughout, what we have done is the GRI standard, first on a core basis and afterwards on an exhaustive basis. In order to comply with the demands and with the requirements of our stakeholders, we have to bear in mind that we are providing this information in the sake of clarity, in the sake of robustness, in the sake to fulfill the demands of our stakeholders. We would like to be as clear as possible, as transparent as possible, because we know that our model is robust. We think that the companies, if they don't have a model that they can comply with this, for example, TCFD requirements, they need to go in that direction, little by little, but without further ado. I think that it's important to fulfill. So I will kindly suggest fulfill the law throughout kind of standards. GRI, for example, or the ones SASB, but I think the GRI is more based, SASB is more based on a financial point of view, and GRI is more on a holistic based ESG global basis. For sure, the TCFD will provide an important thing on a governance basis, because we haven't talked a lot about the governance. But if in our case, if the board of directors doesn't push to go down the road and to fulfill these requirements in the terms of the TCFD GRI, you are not going to be able to get on board the company, get on board the different businesses, get on board the different direction that we have. So I think it's very important, and I think it's the key milestone. The governance, you have a strong governance, fulfill as we have right now, that we have these ESG criteria, we have the climate objectives embedded in our core business and in our governance. I think is the most important thing, frankly speaking, and everything will go step by step, little by little.
Perfect. Andy or Wim, do you have any thoughts on that particular question as well?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we should, let's be, really clear that in very short space of time, there won't be an option. It will be a mandatory disclosures aligned with in 130 countries that align with IFRS, and all European headquartered companies, and even those who have operations within the EU, will be required to disclose against the new mandatory requirements. So we know a lot of them are going to be aligned with TCFD in some way. So I would, if companies aren't already getting their head around of how to disclose against TCFD, they should be doing that kind of now or yesterday. And in terms of assurance, that's going to be a fundamental requirement. So if your internal audit and internal processes aren't set up to assure your ESG information, certainly starting with climate, because we know that's where the IFRS and ISSB is starting with climate, and same with the EU. But if you're not set up, then it's going to be a real struggle for you.
Absolutely. I think that's a key message there is get started with, if there's one that you feel like you need to focus on, the TCFD looks like it's going to be the fundamental kind of foundation to a lot of the kind of development of these standards as they go forward. So, having a look at what that is, and it takes time, as Wim was saying. We've got the status report that shows that there has been some improvements, but it does take time to fully embed within your companies. And this actually brings us quite nicely to the second question that we have here, and that's kind of, as you were mentioning women, and you talked about this in your presentation Indigo, that there's two perspectives almost. Well, there is two perspectives. There's that outward in and that inward out. Also in the EU known as double materiality, and I think personally, I think that the double materiality description actually provides quite a lot of clarity as in terms of the two different purposes of reporting and the two different approaches that need to be taken. But how have you seen companies dealing with double materiality? We hear a lot about it in policy, but actually, what does that mean in practice, and how does that work?
Yeah, I've worked on this with a few companies where what essentially it started with is, and I think Inigo also showed the materiality matrix that we're also used to if you are in sustainability space. And in a way, it's striking that for a long time this has been kind of disconnected from the other disclosure in an annual report, which is the risk paragraph, and very practically to apply the double materiality concept starts with just matching the two and saying, if a topic is material for our stakeholders and we have a significant impact, then it should also be connected to our risks. Otherwise, why would it matter? So to have that conversation again with the multidisciplines that Inigo also describes so well, I think, on how they set up a group, a working group for climate. The same applies to double materiality, I think. Now that comes also with an issue, which is the issue is that most risk management departments focus on a shorter term horizon. And as we know, some of the issues are not short term. So you need to and broaden the horizon, if you like, of the lens that you use to look at double materiality. So in addition to matching the materiality matrix with the risk paragraph and say, how can it be that we have a material topic that is a risk? Or sometimes I've also seen that there's a risk that is not in the materiality matrix, which is even maybe a bit more striking. But then, in addition, this comes with, I call that an informed discussion about the long-term implications, financial implications of sustainability impacts. So what if climate is, known to everyone now, I'm afraid, and unfortunately, but it is what it is. But what if we would have increasing and continuing issues with the availability of raw materials, right, and the waste that comes with it? What would that mean? Well, then we can't produce. Okay, now we get to a risk, but is that playing out now? No, most of the risk management paragraphs will then say no, but what if it happens in 10 years time, right? So it's actually a scenario analysis. It's a what if, right? But then on a long term. Now, and if you take the very long term, then double materiality is effectively single materiality, which is on the long term, everything that is non-financial now will become financial. So if we say, we just don't care about inequality, it's an issue for our stakeholders, but for us it's not so relevant. Still, we'll report a little on it. On the long term, this will create conflicts. And conflicts will impact markets and resources, etc. So on the very long term, every double materiality topic is single. So the other final comment then is to narrow down the horizon to something like 10, 15 years. That's what you can foresee to some extent, get some qualitative scenarios about. And then that brings you, in most cases, as I have seen, it brings you even closer to this is really material for us. This is really the business value of those material topics that Inigo is working on for such a long time. And the other way around, right? For risk management to understand how they can support the sustainability of the company.
Andy, I could see you on mute. Is there something you want to add to the discussion around materiality?
I was just, so one of the other projects that I manage at WBCSD is a project called Reporting Matters, and we review our members' sustainability reports. And actually, we read all 553 pages of Eaton Year's individual report. So that was interesting. But one of the things it really reinforces what Rim was saying on that sort of disconnect between sometimes between the materiality assessment and when we see that in the reports, that there's often not this clear integration. So that's clearly an area that, particularly as we look at the sort of forthcoming disclosure standards that our members and companies really need to go with, and we've been, trying to support our members with that process over the last couple of years. So I just wanted to sort of flag to make a supporting point to what Vin was saying there.
No, absolutely. I think that the point around integration and connecting, the non-financial and financial, and as you said, when we talk about non-financial and financial as two separate things, but they are, in essence, we live on one planet, we live in one world. They're all interconnected, and they're all going to play out in slightly different ways. So having that understanding of what the complexities are in the first instance, just having that understanding of the complexities, and then trying to understand how that will, in the short, medium and long term, impact on your business's ability, absolutely is important.
Yeah, and maybe I should also reiterate that it is, I think, such an opportunity to use the upcoming disclosure requirements for improving your business understanding, if you like, or your business management, right? So I would say to all of us here in the webinar today, don't see disclosure as an objective in itself, right? But use it for improving your company and the business.
I think that we put a good point over there. I think that the reporting is a consequence of your business. I mean, we don't have to take that as a for sure. You have to fulfill the law, you have to fulfill the requirements, but in order to internally run these businesses or run this what if, and try to know if your business has the resilience enough in order to be maintained 10 years time, 15 years time for the future. I think that's a good point. Thank you for your comments.
Absolutely. We're coming close to the hour now, but I want to make sure I utilize all of the time I have with you as possible. So I'm gonna close on one final question, and if all three of you could kind of give a very quick kind of point, because I think so far actually this webinar has been very practical, and I think that's exactly what companies want now. We've got the standards developing, we've got these things, but the how, what do I do and how do I do it is very important. So the question to all three of you, and I'm sure I've heard this question loads of times on webinars, so I'm not being original, but if you had one piece of advice for companies to get started, what would that advice be? And let's start with you, Inigo, and we'll go to Wim and then Andy.
Sorry, what would be the first step would be try to, as I think put out Wim, a key word, sorry to repeat myself, but the governance is key, the risk assessment is key, and try to run as many scenarios as you are able to, because that will provide you a good figure, a good overview for the future. And also pointing out a couple of things that Andy said. I mean, homogenization for sure we need, but please give us some time, because otherwise we will end up killing ourselves, slowly but killing ourselves. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Inigo. I fully agree. That is, of course, Gemma, the issue of asking for one advice. But if I have to, as you ask, I would say it is something like focus, focus, focus. And what I mean with that is take a qualitative view at your business, assess what are the most important topics that would put you out of business because of the impacts or because of the direct financial risk, and then start looking at how could I track performance and progress on these issues. That is, so to really bring it down. I've seen too many sustainability reports that try to cover all and everything, and then lose business relevance, and that loses. Then it means you also lose support internally. So that's it for now, but I have more advice, as you know. But okay, it is what it is. We need Andy also to give his. Here you go, Andy.
Well, I'll echo both of those and say they were excellent pieces of advice. I think from our side, one of the things that I would say is that if you're working in sustainability reporting and you don't know the people in finance and risk management, make sure you do. Get to know them really well, make them allies. And if you're working in risk, get to know the people who are leading our sustainability work, because these two things are, they're fundamentally interconnected. And what we're seeing with the implications of the disclosure requirements is that you're going to need to know them really well and get along. So that's would be my sort of closing point.
3 very practical and helpful pieces of advice. And yes, I know there's plenty of things that we can help. It's very complex. So we're just over the hour, and so I want to say thank you to our 3 speakers today who've really brought a lot of practical advice, as I said, and some kind of colourful conversations around the different types of reporting, the reporting landscape. And thank you for everyone for joining. We will be following up with the recording and a few links as well to some of the resources that all 3 speakers have spoken about today. So thank you very much and goodbye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.